Support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum. Located in Jennings City Hall, the museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is a historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. Additional support provided by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting and viewers like you.
Hurricane Audrey was the very first hurricane to ever be tracked by radar.
But even with the most advanced forecasting tool of the day, did an epic error just before landfall cost hundreds of people their lives? Hi everyone, I'm Audrey. That was 1957. On the state we're in, 60 years later, what still baffles and angers so many about Audrey. We examine the facts. Plus, now a new menace on our coast. Kelly Spires investigates for us. But first, here are some other stories making headlines. Throw it out and start over. That's what Governor John Bel Edwards would do with the Senate GOP's health care rewrite. He says the current model would badly hurt state Medicare programs at a time when those programs are just beginning to help the people of Louisiana who need them the most.
I signed a letter. There were 6 of my colleagues from around the country, governors, Republicans, and Democrats, calling upon the Senate leadership, both Senator McConnell and Senator Schumer, to have a bipartisan approach to health care and a transparent approach.
UL Monroe wants to help a shortage of doctors in Northeast Louisiana by adding a medical school. ULM President Nick Bruno took to Twitter announcing Board of Regents grant license to operate medical school at ULM. Talon's out. The New York Institute of Technology got the license to operate the school, and if a number of hurdles are cleared, the College of Osteopathic Medicine could open in 2 years. The family of Alton Sterling is suing Baton Rouge police and the city, citing a history of racism and excessive force as contributing factors in Sterling's death. Police shot and killed Sterling outside a convenience store last summer during a struggle to arrest him. And East Baton Rouge District Attorney Hiller Moore today released an exhaustive report on the ambush killing of 3 Baton Rouge law enforcement officers 12 days after Sterling's death. Moore says the gunman who killed the officers searched online for the home addresses of those officers involved in the Sterling case, and that he acted alone in the elaborate ambush. Until Hurricane Katrina, Audrey was the name recognized as the most feared storm to strike Louisiana. And until 2005, the year of Katrina, it was the deadliest hurricane in the U.S. in modern times, claiming about 500 lives, perhaps 600. Exact number not known. Yet Audrey carries almost a shroud of secrecy. On the storm's 60th anniversary, we went to Audrey's definitive expert to find out why. Early summer 1957. Louisiana, like most of America, is under a spell spun by Elvis Presley. Elvis's All Shook Up is 57's Song of the Year and #1 for 8 straight weeks until Thursday, June 13th. It just so happens exactly 2 weeks later, much of coastal Louisiana is going to be shook up, but not in a way anyone could really imagine. And if not for mistakes in forecasting, the outcome could have been different. But as history will show us, a rare June hurricane named Audrey and the right atmospheric mix will result in catastrophe for a region that never fully recovers.
This is your Esso reporter with headlines of the world.
Tonight's program is devoted entirely to the story of a town that died a sudden death.
When Audrey strikes, Cameron's population is about 3,000. The most recent census puts the number at 406. The most thorough account of the ordeal and struggle of life over death is told in Hurricane Audrey, The Deadly Storm of 1957. Author Carol C. Post published the book in 2007, after Katrina took Audrey's place as the most notorious of Louisiana storms.
I was a 10-year-old at the time, so I was old enough to understand what was going on and to remember how bad it was. This was such a traumatic event for the people of southwest Louisiana, and specifically Cameron.
This is the main street in Cameron. You have to walk over, it must be 6 feet, a 6-foot-high pile of wreckage, wrecked timber, lumber.
Audrey boiled up out of the Gulf of Mexico, and at first many persons didn't appreciate what a killer she would be.
Before long, most of the reporters are gone, and the survivors are left with what's next and what now. A curious postscript to life after Audrey for a storm that is such a record breaker for all the worst of reasons. Audrey is rarely discussed, especially by those who know it the best.
Most people did not talk about this storm to the media or in interviews or to any outsiders for over 30 years.
Really?
That's why whenever a hurricane would hit the coast of the United States, you would always hear the reporters talk about and compare it to Hurricane Andrew or Hurricane Camille or the Galveston hurricane, but they never mentioned Hurricane Audrey.
A look at the 10 p.m. advisory from the New Orleans Weather Bureau on June 26th, the night before landfall, provides some insight. In short, it reads, Audrey has 100-mile-an-hour winds, is 235 miles south of Lake Charles, moving north at 7 miles an hour, expected to come ashore later on the afternoon of June 27th. Then at 1 a.m., 3 hours later, a stunned Lake Charles Weather Bureau realizes things are changing. They are reading hard-to-believe new data on Audrey. Only Post says they can see what they're reading is true and that people don't know what's about to hit them.
Hurricane Audrey was the very first hurricane to ever be tracked by radar.
Right.
This was huge. This gave them the exact location, the intensity, the forward movement.
How did somebody not make the call to some city official or somebody? That question remains largely unanswered.
This is the point in history where thousands of lives hung in the balance in both Cameron and Vermilion Parish. One phone call could have made a difference.
Instead, what is known is that Audrey hits the coast with Category 4 winds. Its storm surge is massive, at least 12 feet high, and it rolls inland 25 miles, crushing everything in its path. We can hear what some faced when they woke up early on June 27th, surrounded by rising water, wind, and death.
All of a sudden, we could see the tidal wave coming in the marsh right in front of us.
You could hear it before you could see it. Yeah. When we left, it's a big gray wall just that's coming at you. What it was rolling in the front.
Yeah, debris.
Them waves was coming, and it would just roll like that, and you can't imagine what was coming in there. And when it hit that ridge, it was all over but the crying. That's all we could do was hang on for dear life.
My mama and my sister drowned, but
they found my sister in that pond. She was still holding on to the grass on that levee.
We knew there was a hurricane, but it wasn't supposed to hit till the next day. We got on 2x4s of the roof of the house. We had to straddle our legs, and I was black and blue from my hip to the tip of my toes. God didn't want me. He took the ones he wanted and left us to tell this story.
The name Audrey was soon retired and will never be used again to name a hurricane. Recess gives school kids a quick break from the classroom to get fresh air, to socialize. But the recess many of us knew back in our school days, which is quite a while for some of us, doesn't really exist for many. Statistics show that more than 1 in 5 schools give kids from kindergarten to 8th grade fewer than 15 minutes a day during the school day to burn off energy on the playground. Some schools have done away with recess altogether, according to an annual report from the State Department of Education. So this news for pediatrician Dr. Stuart Gordon is not good news. You strongly disagree with it, to say the least, because you have spent your life working with childhood obesity, preventing it, ways to help children be all that they can be. So your initial reaction to this?
Well, the initial reaction of the science is clear already that the last thing we need to do is decrease play opportunities for kids, especially the young. Kids are, wired to play, to be active, to fidget, to burn off their energy, and especially in the early years, they need as many opportunities to stay active as possible. And it's pretty clear with after kids have spent 30 to, and even adults, 30 to 40 minutes of continuous mental stimulation, you need a little break in order to have better academic performance and better ability to focus and stay on task.
I wonder if part of this, though, is some parents, they push their kids early, perhaps because they want to get that Harvard scholarship, or they want to make sure they do something, and so they've got to be in there.
Yeah.
But that's not the approach. You need a balance would be the approach.
Absolutely. And we see, obviously we're a lot more focused on academic achievement than we ever have been, meeting grade level expectations, testing well and all that, but we may have smart kids, but they actually do better if they have more activity, and the studies show that if you're more active and have more time to have a break in that mental capacity, you're more likely to be successful.
Now, you've got a history of public policy working to ensure that PE is mandatory in school.
Yeah, and Louisiana, I think, was one of the few states that actually has a mandatory physical activity requirement for elementary school. We put in healthy vending bills several years back through the work of Louisiana Obesity Council. So there's lots of policy in place for schools and school districts to follow. I think what's become difficult is because they're so measured on their academic achievement as a school and graded that there's only so many hours in the day to get the academics in. The other thing that parents need to realize is half of our awake life is spent away from home after you enter school. So the environment to influence how you turn out is at the school. So we need to nurture a supportive, healthy lifestyle environment at school.
If this continues, or if the pace even increases to where there is no recess time, would you take it upon yourself at some point to try to speak to somebody or to get a group of doctors together to?
Oh yeah, I'm sure that like State Chapter American Academy of Pediatrics, a lot of the Layford and other groups in the state,
people are picketing probably.
They are not going to be happy if we think about eliminating recess from the school day altogether. That would not bode well for our kids' future success.
We were always taught, balance, strike a balance. That's sort of the key to life, and it only makes sense that having some kind of recess and activity would be striking a balance along with your academics.
Absolutely.
All right. Dr. Gordon, thank you very much.
Thanks for
having me. I appreciate you being here.
Sure.
Thanks a lot for the discussion. Another of our big stories today, there's a new danger to Louisiana's wetlands. Hundreds of thousands of acres of Roseau cane are at risk of dying off, and scientists are not sure why. Now, the name Roseau cane may not be familiar, but you know this plant. It covers areas along the coast and near wetlands. It is vital because its roots hold wetland soil together. They provide a buffer to storm surge and also a habitat for wildlife. LPB's Kelly Spires investigates the mystery.
It is easier to go out and find dead Roseau cane than it is to find live, healthy Roseau cane. Here at the mouth of the river, it's true. I was at Golden Meadow yesterday. Every patch I looked at was dead. All the Roseau cane is dying and then coming back again and dying and coming back again.
Andy Nyman is a Louisiana native who's been studying the cane for decades and fishing at the mouth of the river for most of his life.
This is what used to be out here. A lot of thick stems and healthier than this one. This one doesn't look nearly as healthy as the one we pulled up over on the edge. And this is what's replacing it. And the strength just isn't in here.
Earlier this month, a group of about 30 researchers, state and federal agency officials, and nonprofit members met in Venice to talk about something so small you might need a magnifying glass to see it. A tiny bug newly discovered in Louisiana with big consequences.
The roots of wetland plants are important throughout coastal Louisiana because they create the elevation that offsets subsidence and sea level rise. And they also create a layer of very tough stuff to resist erosion even. And Roseau cane is one of the best at making these really thick, dense, tough root networks.
There's a bug that's sucking sap from the cane, causing it to weaken and diminish.
But then it's coming up not as dense, fewer stems per acre, and the stems are not yet as tall and robust, and then it looks like it dies back again. And it looks to me as though the plant is slowly exhausting all the below ground energy it's got stored in its roots, and it's eventually going to run out of time.
Rodrigo Diaz studies invasive bug species with LSU. He helped organize the mini conference. He says the life cycle of the bug starts with a pregnant female. The gestation period is about 10 days.
The eggs eventually will hatch, and the crawlers, that will be the babies, right? They look like a tiny roaches. They will be coming out of the female, out of mom, that is probably then by now, and then they will be walking along the stem, and then they will settle in one point. They will insert the beak or the proboscis, and they will start sucking the sap of the plant.
Then males impregnate the females, and the cycle starts again. Diaz doesn't know how long the cycle takes.
I will suspect, basically from other systems, that may take between 45 to 55 days going from egg to a mature adult, but we don't know that for sure.
Large-scale die-offs in Plaquemines Parish earlier this year drew scientists' attention to the bug. Most of the sites of die-offs, marked with green dots, featured the bugs. The starred sites, however, are die-off sites that have been surveyed where the bugs have not been found, and that leaves scientists puzzled.
There are some sites with a stress cane, but without the scales, which brings the question that probably there are several stressors on this system. Could be eutrophication, of course the scales will be one, and also could be, for example, the arrival of toxins on the ground. So it should be a combination of stressors.
Another indication that the bug isn't the root cause of the recent crisis is that there's a well-established system of predators of the bug.
That are tiny wasps that attack this scale. So thinking, that how these three natural enemies that are actually from Asia, specifically China and Japan, how they got here and why they are already so widespread throughout our infestations in the southern parishes, brings something that we have been exploring, is that probably these insects have been here for a couple of years.
Maybe even a decade. Luckily, perhaps, there's not just one kind of Roseau cane. There are at least 4 in Plaquemines Parish, according to LSU scientist Jim Cronin.
What's been really important, and something that my group has been studying for almost a decade now, is that we know that these varieties differ tremendously in a lot of respects. And in this case, they differ tremendously in their resistance to insects.
In Plaquemines, the variety called Delta is the most widely spread kind of cane. From very preliminary observations, European appears to be more resistant to these bugs.
Given that the Delta variety is so prevalent down on the coast, it suggests that it's probably really tolerant of salinity, wave action, water depth, and all these other possible stressors. We don't know anything about the European variety, but that's one of the things that we're going to do experimentally.
Cronin and Diaz have devised experiments to learn more about the cane varieties, but that will take 2 years.
It takes a while to propagate the plants for the research, and to do the experiments properly, you have to start everybody from the same conditions. So we have to cut little root sections, rhizomes, so that they're all the same size, they're all the same source, and then we pot them and grow them. All along the way, we'll be stressing the plants in other ways too. So we'll salt stress a subset of the plants. We'll raise some of the other plants in deep water versus shallow water. And there may be some other stressors that we'll use based on what we find in our censuses over the next couple of months.
They'll also test to see if the bug likes other Louisiana plants. In other parts of the world, relatives of the bug eat sorghum and sugarcane.
We're seeing these die-offs are occurring in a matter of months, so it's a rapid system. So what we have in place is a different experiments and actually field surveys to understand, where these die-offs are occurring, what is the extent of the impact.
There's a lot left to learn about what's happening. Diaz says they're guided in part by literature from similar mystery die-offs in Europe in the early 2000s.
The fascinating aspect and at the same time the scary aspect. In terms of size, it's definitely a massive problem, and we're talking about just in Plaquemines Parish, perhaps in the tens of thousands of acres being impacted, and that's something alarming, I will say.
Kelly, thank you for that report. Are you into fishing or preservation? You can help Drs. Diaz and Cronin in their research. Check out the online survey on your screen to report any die-offs of Rosa cane that you may come in contact with. You'll be asked to provide a picture and send in a sample if you can. And now a visit with artist Caroline Youngblood. She grew up in rural North Louisiana and shares how her family and her roots influence her art.
After completing a master's degree in fine arts in 2011, Caroline Youngblood returned to her home base in Monroe, Louisiana to open up shop. Since then, her artistic journey has been full of adventure, but the path contains touchstones that are comfortably familiar.
It all started off with finding a book of Kodachrome slides. Even though they were of people that I didn't know, and situations I didn't know, they felt very familiar. And these dated from like the late 50s to mid 60s. So I started doing paintings of Kodachrome slides.
As her paintings developed, Youngblood showed a strong preference for imagery from an earlier age. Eventually, she turned to collage as a medium. And she didn't have to go far to look for the ephemera necessary for her creations.
I grew up in a really old home in Riverton, Louisiana. It was my great-grandparents' home, and then my grandparents moved there, and then my dad moved there, and then I moved there. So we had 4 generations worth of stuff that my ancestors were just not willing to throw away. It was hoarded, it was collected, it was almost sacred. You know, these things that other people would have easily just thrown away. For some reason, my ancestors decided they wanted to keep these things. And at some point, I realized the connection, and I knew that that stuff was left behind for me to make art out of. I first started doing it with recipes. For some reason, the handwritten recipes were really appealing to me. It was almost like a form of oral tradition with women back then. You know, when they'd get together, they'd exchange recipes, and they were all handwritten, and they'd have little comments on them. I started just basically putting the things down and almost making kind of an abstract pattern out of them. The older stuff was a lot more interesting to me, and I think it was because it was a lot more exotic. They used older printing techniques. Most things were handwritten. The photographic techniques had more of a historical or antique type look versus the things that were newer. And then at some point, I decided to start using the figurative images from Kodachrome slides, from old photographs, from 8mm film and things of that nature to kind of superimpose on top of the collage. The reason I really like this technique is because from far away, you see the figure, you see kind of a geometric abstraction behind the figure, but it's not until you get up close and really look at these things that you can see that there's handwriting in there, or you can see that this is an actual old advertisement and things like that. When I decided to step away from the more personal imagery and come up with more of a symbol that I could work with and I could explore more with painting techniques, not necessarily collage techniques, I chose cotton because of the significance in my family. I grew up on a cotton plantation. My great-grandfather farmed it and my grandfather farmed it, and I've always had a connection with cotton and, you know, the smell of the cotton. Just watching the whole process of it, watching the farmers plant the seeds and it grow and it turns into a flower and all that, and then the harvesting.
Youngblood likes to approach subjects that are symbolic of Louisiana, like the cotton paintings. In her most recent series, she depicts huge abstractions of oyster shells.
Well, my fascination with oyster shells is nothing new. I can remember from a really young age, if we went and ate oysters, I wanted to take them home with me. I would take them home and clean them, and I'd put them in my bathroom, or I'd put them somewhere, because for some reason, the way they look, the shape, and then that pearlescent effect that they have, I've just always really liked that. So I was looking for another outlet to just play with paint and have fun and work with color. You know, cotton isn't necessarily that colorful if you're just going to try to render it as it really looks. But an oyster shell has so much potential, like with all the smooth areas and then the rocky texture and then all that, that full prism of rainbow color. Each one just became an experiment. You know, try something new on each painting, and I have never done two that are alike. Just like an oyster shell, you know, no two are ever alike.
As part of a young vanguard of creative professionals in North Louisiana, Caroline Youngblood is proving to be an artist who is one of a kind.
Yes, she is. You can find more stories about Louisiana artists, along with information on upcoming art events by going to lpb.org/artrocks. You can also watch Art Rocks on Friday nights at 8:30 right here on LPB. And that is our show for this week. Remember, you can watch LPB on demand on your phone or tablet with our LPB Anywhere app. The download is free from your app store. And you can catch LPB news and public affairs shows as well as other Louisiana programs that you've come to enjoy over the years. And please like us on Facebook as well. For everyone here at Louisiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Audrey Morrow. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, that's the state we're in.
Check us out on Facebook and Twitter, and visit lpb.org, where you can view more stories and leave us a comment. This program is available on DVD. Support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum. Located in Jennings City Hall, the museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is a historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. Additional support provided by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting and viewers like you.